Alright, good evening everybody. How's it going? Hope you're having a super afternoon, super evening, wherever you are. Let's have a look, see who we've got in the chat at the moment. Fairly small crowd this evening. Hey Amy, how's it going? Hope you're hard at work on the UNS system still. Maybe taking a break from it just now. Totorico, good evening. Can't wait to see this Challenger. Looking very excited for the Challenger now. Feeling it must be quite close. Hey Pancake King, how's it going? No more EGT exceedances? No more barrel rolls tonight? Hopefully we're looking for a fairly straightforward trip down from Hamburg down to Nice in France. We've got Ocean as well, how's it going? Oh, I don't know if I want that in the chat. That's a bit grotesque really, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Some shenanigans later. Well, let's have a look at the route and see what we're going to do first of all. Let's see if this works. So, we're going to fly from Hamburg up here in Germany. Not the main Hamburg airport, but Finkenwerder, I believe it's pronounced. It's where the A321's final assembly takes place. We're going to route down basically in a straight line all the way across, down towards Zurich, across northwestern Italy, and then down into Nice. You can see here at Nice that one of the interesting things is the arrival takes us about 30 miles off track. We're coming in from the northeast. We're going to go 30 miles out to sea and then 30 miles back in again. But maybe we'll not do that. Maybe we'll fly a little bit of a shortcut. So fairly low-key kind of thing. I've got nothing really planned to have a look at in the flight other than just the general operation of the aircraft. Can you hear me okay? Is the audio quality good enough for you at the moment? Too loud, too quiet? Just let me know in the chat. So let's jump into X-Plane. So I've been flying this quite a bit over the past week just to get familiar with it. It's fairly good. It's got some oddities. If you've not seen the external model on the 321, best not to look too closely at the external model. It's serviceable, but there's a few little oddities in it. Thanks for the audio report, Totorico. Thanks very much. It does the job. It's got lots of options. You can change the SATCOM antenna, you can change the winglets, you can change the engines. But other than that, it's fairly straightforward. So jumping inside, we are all cold and dark at the moment, and it's 14:45. Let's see if we can get the aircraft off the stand by 1500. See if that's possible. So before powering up, it's fairly straightforward on the Airbus. We're just going to double check the park and brake set. Going to make sure that the radar is off, the engine masters are off, the engine start switch is off, the flaps lever is in the same position as we saw on the outside of the aircraft. Transponder's off, landing gear lever is down. And coming up here, make sure the windscreen wiper selectors are off as well, because you don't want to put the power on and then fire up the windscreen wipers. One of the things that's a bit different on the Airbus is the fact you can connect external power without any battery source. So the battery LEDs here are up showing the voltage, and we've got the clock, but nothing else at all. If I put one of the batteries on, you'll see the other one shows the off light. So that's just telling you that this one's on and this one's off. Of course, they were both off to begin with. It was just the fact that there wasn't any power to supply those lights. Why they didn't illuminate the off light with the same power supply that was illuminating these, I don't really know. But let's put the external power in and we'll fire it up. It takes a fair amount of time for these aircraft to start up. These LCD displays are quicker than the old CRTs. And one of the downsides to flying with a LCD aircraft that you don't get the full experience of in the sim is cold feet. So the old glass monitors, the old cathode ray tubes, put out an awful lot of heat. And I don't know if it's modelled in this. Let's have a quick look. If we go down there, it's not really modelled, but behind the rudder pedals you can actually get all the way down into the avionics bay. It's quite common for the engineers to remove apples or other items of fruit from down there. Yeah, you can certainly put the ground power in without the battery on the Airbus Pancake King. That's not a problem at all. It'll quite happily take it. In fact, one of the checks that we do is to make sure the batteries are 25.5 volts. If the batteries are below 25.5 volts when you put the external power in, then you run it for 20 minutes and then you cycle the batteries off So it's still quite happy with the external power selected. You can also, in that test, you bring up the electrical page, and as we put the batteries online, you see it shows you the voltage on the overhead. We put the battery online and we check the charging current isn't too high. I think it's 60 amps. I'd need to look it up. I don't remember it ever being much higher than 10 or 15. But with the battery off, you check the voltage is above 25.5. These batteries were fine today. With it powered up, the next thing we'll do is do the checks. There is a specific, the fire bell checks. There's a specific way of doing it, but to be honest, we just do all three of them when we're up here. Again, in the real thing, I'd hold the test button down and then simultaneously push the master button so that we can make sure we can cancel the bell. Right, so having done that, we'll put the crew oxygen supply on, the cockpit voice recorder on, that's so the accident investigation board can listen quite clearly to our rather poor pre-flight brief. I'll put the IRs on, so there's IR1 to nav, IR2 to nav, IR3 to nav. We'll come down here, I'll put the no smoking lights to auto, and I'll put the emergency exit lights to arm. On all modern aircraft, the no smoking lights are always on, but the auto position controls the exit lights with the extension of the gear. Strobes to auto, nav lights on, and the annunciator. We can test the lights if necessary and put them back to dim. Looking up here, economy flow, that's probably going to be relevant for this little Airbus. We're taking it on a delivery trip down to Nice, so we'll have a fairly low load. And the fuel pumps, you can switch the fuel pumps on after fueling's complete, but most crew will leave them switched off until we transfer onto APU power, just because there's quite a high current drain from those fuel pumps. On this panel here, not much to do really. There's a cargo smoke test. I don't know if that's modelled on here, and I'll click it on the radio panel here. Nobody ever switches those off. I don't know why the model starts with them off. Cool, there's something I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, I noticed that the temperature selectors here are notches in the model. They don't really notch, they're just a smooth movement. But, you know, that'll be approximately the right position. Alright. I'll catch up in your chat in just a second. I want to get these IRs lined up first of all. So, everything else is done on the overhead. On the main panel, we're going to put the constraints on first of all, and we'll check. We've got the QNH 1013 set, we've got accumulator pressure here, clock set to GPS, and the anti-skid selected on. Coming down here, we'll turn the brightness up on both the displays. I'm doing the job of two pilots at the moment. Turn the radio panels on both sides, and down here make sure the radar tilt is set up a little bit, and set to system 1 and above for the transponder. Toto, what's Toto want from me? Let's have a look. Just scrolling back through the chat. Oh, you get the green Paraveil light, but nothing else. Excellent. It's actually on the Airbus is if the batteries are on, the landing gear lights are the most obvious sign that you've got DC power on the aircraft. Right, let's get into the FMGC and start setting up. Actually, before we do that, we should probably put some passengers on the aircraft. I'm going to have it maybe 20 or 30 passengers just for a delivery flight load. And as far as the fuel loading goes, well, it's about an hour and a half down to Nice. So we're going to start off, let's say we'll put 2.5 tons in for taxi and final reserves and alternate. The first hour will burn 3.5 tons, so that takes it up to 6. And the next hour would burn about 2.6. So I'll put another 1.3 on, takes up to 7.3, and I'll put another 200 or 300 on just for mum and dad. That should probably do it. Cool, so all loaded up. Let's get the box set up here. I'll just pop that out. Sometimes it's easier with the display popped out here. Bring it over this side. On the flight plan, we'll just say we're going from EDHI to LFMN. I should probably have looked at using a sim brief plan for this. Let's align the IRs. We're Air France, so Air France 321. I'll probably do is cost index 30. Probably fast enough. And let's say we can go up to 3, let's try 380. That should just about work. Hey, thanks for the follow, Vinny and Pom, much appreciated. Wind request. I don't fly with winds. Wind's a real world thing, we don't bother with winds in the sim. On the flight plan, I've got the tablet thingy here. What's it called? Have a tab, there we go. Right, so I'm going to fly the departure EDHI, it's runway 05, and the EDHI, where are we? EDHI 8 Echo. And did that load? We should have an insert button on this side here. It's a little bit of a mismatch between various different systems, but with the temporary flight plan function, the temporary insert should present on the previous screen as well. But no biggie. So from EDHI, let's load the airways. It's going to be the November 850. And it should automatically swap over. Let's give it a go. If I put Upper November 850 in the next airway, let's see if it does it. Sometimes it's not the most reliable. And yeah, that's done it via Warburg. I'll put this one in because it's gone back onto the same airway, and that is guaranteed to confuse it. Nator, and then back on the November 850. No idea why the routing goes between the upper airways and the normal airways at that altitude. Just different countries with different rules, I guess. Odina. Yeah, there's a setting, Captain Crash, that switches on and off the temporary flight plan. What that does, let me do this just now. If I insert that, so if I'm doing a lateral revision, like if I'm loading the arrival into Nice, let's just do this so you can see that. I'm going to load the RNAV 04 right alpha, and it's going to be via not Neras, the board 6 Romeo. Right. No via. So the temporary flight plan behavior, that's this screen here. The fact it's still showing in yellow, it hasn't committed it to the box. When you've got an older machine, it'll go straight in as soon as you load it. And I think the Toliss system always has the temporary behavior. The Honeywell systems, they can just insert directly. Right, so I missed a few points there. We've got, where are we? Odina, Tonda, Bordy, that should do it. Tonda, nope. Tonda, insert. And the next one's Bordy, so that should do it. Right, insert. And what I would do is obviously check through the route to make sure there's no discontinuities, no unexpected discontinuities. But we're all good there. I'm going to make a copy of the active flight plan so we've got a backup. How are we doing for time? 55 minutes. Let's fire up the APU. So, master switch on. Start the APU, and obviously with all the fuel on board I'll put the seatbelt signs on now as well. Come on APU, you can start. It's going now, awesome. Right, APU is on the way. IRs are just about there, another 2 minutes to go. What should we have a look at? I guess we could double check on the APU screen here. Yeah, that's starting up fine. So whilst that's firing up, let me show you one of the slight annoyances I've got with this model. I don't know if annoyance is the correct phrase, frustration shall we say. So this departure here, we've got above 1100 feet, and the stop altitude for the departure from one of the previous pages is 5,000 feet. On the FMGC here, there is no altitude constraint shown for this HI 200 point. There's nothing on there, but if I click on it, it has it. That's not right. It should always show the altitude constraints it's got when you load the waypoints. The other thing we want to look at is this maximum of 210 knots, because that's the more sketchy one, shall we say. It does some weird things as well, like arming the slides when the aircraft's parked on the gate. I don't understand that. I'm going to feed that back to developers, that's just a little bit weird. We should probably sort that out. Anyway, APU is running. With the APU running, I'll put the APU bleed on. I'll take the external power off, and I shall switch off. Switch on the fuel pumps. Make sure all the lights are off. So ground control, that's expected. Economy flow and the APU bleed, that's the only abnormal setup we've got. The IRs are just about there. I shall take out the ground power. And then we are ready to go. It's not a good idea on the Airbus to start data entry before the IRs are fully aligned. It can have some weird behavior. If you do that, you'll get a decelerate as you expect to be accelerating, which isn't really desirable. I think it's been modded out of a lot of the later aircraft, but there's still a general feeling on the majority of Airbus drivers that you just wait for the IRs to line before you do any data entry. So what's important to understand is pretty much everything we've done at the moment would be done by one of the pilots, the pilot monitoring, while the pilot flying is out doing the walk around, dealing with the flight paperwork and everything else. Pilot flying would come back into the seat, they check the oxygen mask, check the flight control armrest and the rudder pedal positions, and then check the routing through. Yeah, you don't need to switch off the IRs, Vinny, unless there's a significant drift. You can do a quick realign on them. Right, so once you've got both pilots back and actively involved in doing things with the aircraft, we can do the data entry. On this aircraft it's quite straightforward. We just get the loading performance here. So only 30 passengers, it's a fairly light aircraft. Also calculate the takeoff performance, it does it automatically in here. On the previous stream we looked at the trimmable horizontal stab, and I didn't put the value in, and we'll look at that as we do that. So next page, init B, we're going to put the zero fuel weight. The zero fuel weight is over here, it's 50.8, 50.8, and the ZFW CG is 28.6. 28.6 in there. It's suggesting a block fuel of 7.7. The aircraft is displaying a block fuel of 7.7, so let's put 7.7 in here. The numbers are go biased. How do you mean? I think it's a fairly with a fairly lightweight aircraft, you wouldn't expect to stay on the ground for long. I don't think this calculator does anything like improved V2. Sometimes the calculators can keep the aircraft on the ground for a little bit longer, so that when they get airborne they've got a higher V2 speed and a better second segment climb, but I don't think this has got the sophistication to do that. Anyway, we've loaded the init B, and then we go into the perf page, and to just double check, it is runway 05 at EDHI, which it is. So runway 05, 0 shift, it's going to be flaps 1, and what I'll do is I'll put the trimmable stab value in this case. It's down 0.3, so I just put the 0.3 in there. Now the vast majority of Airbus operators don't bother with this anymore, and that's because we use the CG value rather than the up-down value. Our flex thrust is 46. Excels are standard at 1500 feet, engine out's 1000, and the speeds V1 129, V2 129, rotate 129, and V2 133, and our clean speed is 198. Now let me show you another thing about this flight plan system, or the flight management system. Remember, we've got a 210 knot speed restriction around the corner here. What we'd always do on the Airbus is click this next phase button and make sure that our managed speed target, or compare our managed speed target to the clean speed. In this case, my managed speed target is showing 250 knots, and that's not right. It should be showing 210. We'll have a look at that when we get airborne, but there's a little trap in there that we've got to be careful of. So I'm going to email the developers and hope they can get that fixed, because of everything it does wrong, this is the thing that's most frustrating, because it breaks one of the standard procedures you have, that is check your clean speed, in this case 198 knots, and check your first segment, your first departure speed constraint is suitable for clean flying. If we had a speed restriction of, let's say, 190 knots, then we'd have to stay at flap 1 because I wouldn't be above the clean speed. Right, so we've done pretty much everything on there, I think. Let me just double check. We've got the init, the wind ACARS is not fitted, secondary is done. We've not loaded a return case, that doesn't matter. The other thing they've done, which is slightly annoying, is the fuel flight plan save capability is, our button is over this this window here. That's where the EFOB value should be. I've got to go into the fuel prediction page, and it's 3.4 tons. That's perfect. So ready to go. I'll put perf on that side, flight plan on the other side. I'll clear off his warning there, and I think we're going to be good to go. Okay, let's get better pushback in to do the business. You should already know where to go.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to go. Ground to cockpit. Toes driving up.
Excellent. So obviously we could simply start the engines and do a 180-degree turn, but that wouldn't really be in the spirit of having Totarico on here. We want to have a look at this tug. I only ever see the big tug with the A300. We need to get bigger tugs on the A321 here. 321's a big aircraft, not a little aircraft. Right. So notice I haven't done anything at all with the aircraft. We'd normally wait for the ground crew to tell us that we're ready to go before we do anything else. The Airbus checklists, the official Airbus checklists, don't specifically call for the transponder, but
okay,
we would always
all
put
doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect, set, parking brake.
Okay, parking brake is set, disconnect. We'd always turn the transponder and the beacon on and off at the same time. The beacon tells the people that can see the aircraft it's about to move, and the transponder tells the people that can see the aircraft on radar that's about to move. So because we've got ground movement radar at lots and lots of airfields, the transponder is always on when the beacon's on. The TCAS is automatic as well. We can have the TCAS on when we're taxiing away. We don't need to wait until we line up on the runway. Right, so he's connecting. He knows the aircraft's safe. I'm going to put the beacon on, and I'm going to put the transponder on. You know what, I should probably put a proper code
Now
in there.
connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Right, windows, doors closed, flight deck doors locked, and everything else is good. Right, let's go. Parking brake released. Timer is
Starting pushback, and you may start the engines.
running. 5 minutes late. There we go. Alright. I do like the look of the A321. I think it's a nicer looking aircraft than the 319 for sure. 319's fun. Right, it's given us clearance, so let's start the engines. By convention, if we're taxiing on both engines, we'll start number 2 first. If we're doing single engine taxi, it's number 1 only. That's because the yellow pump is only fitted on the right hand side. The left hand side engine has only got an engine driven hydraulic pump. Right, master's selected on, we've got fuel on, we've got APU bleed, we've got FADEC, we've got pressure, we've got idle. Number 2 is on. Vinny, you were asking about the thrust rating on the takeoff run. I think I've got an answer for you there, but I'm going to count on Totarico to keep me 100% straight on that. I think I know what it's doing, why in those videos you see those ratings increase as we accelerate down the runway. The AST-1X is too big for the narrow bodies. I've been on some airports where they've been trying to push a 70-ton aircraft with something that looks like a baggage dolly tug. It's just embarrassingly small. One of the annoyances, if you have an APU start, if you have an APU failure, if you're being pushed by a tow-barreless tug, the ground power umbilical often gets disturbed as they move it around to put the tug in place. So if your APU is unserviceable and you need to start an engine, with the ground power connected, a tow bar tug is a better choice than a TBL tug. Just a bit of interest there. Right, number 2 is running. The FADEC indication's away. Let's start number 1. CFMs start nice and quickly. The IAEs take a little bit longer to start.
Operation complete. Please set parking brake.
Alright, parking brake is set. Clear disconnect. Awaiting visual clearance.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
Oh well, okay then. It's quite impatient. So you get ignition and fuel flow a lot earlier in the start process with the CFM56. The IAEs, you need 30 seconds of cranking before you put any ignition or fuel in, and it does it all by itself. You can manually start it. There's a manual start valve switches up here. Alright. So, available indication and the FADEC's finished.
Tower is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the left. I'll see you next time. Have a safe flight.
Thanks very much. Bye bye now. Right. Once that's happened, once the engine starts complete, the pilot flying, because it's the pilot flying on the Airbus that starts the engines, a bit counterintuitively. So we're going to go back to normal on here. Now that's the trigger that the pilot monitor can start doing their things as well, but I'll do them in sequence. Normal, we turn the APU bleed off, we consider the anti-ice, and we switch the APU master off. The pilot monitoring then checks the crossbleed is set to auto if we've been doing a crossbleed start, puts the yellow pump on if we're doing single engine taxi, and I'm going to set lever, trim, lever, and trim. Now this is where we use the CG value rather than the up-down. I'm going to put it to down 0.3. The reason being is 30, is he out there? Is he finished? He's gone. The reason being is 30 is about the neutral point. On a 319 you usually have to trim nose up, and on a 320 you usually trim nose down, and the values are about the same. So if you're always used to flying 320s and then you get in a 319, you're going to put the trim the wrong way. There's a risk you'll put the trim the wrong way. Whereas if you use the CG, it's less of an issue. So most operators now use the CG value. Airbus SOP is to use the CG value and not the THS value, and that's why we leave that blank for the most part. Some people will still put that in there, but we don't usually do that. Check the doors are all closed and armed, and we are good to go. Check on the right hand side, check on the left hand side, clear ahead, lights on, and brakes off. Let's go. If you made the tug drivers, goodness me, some tug drivers are really quick and some tug drivers are really slow. In Germany and the Netherlands they are scarily efficient. In the UK, a little bit on the slower side. Right, brake pressure check. We don't expect to see any indications on the brake gauge because it's moved on to the normal braking system now. And the cabin's not quite ready. So another suggestion I'm going to make for the devs is between 5 and 7 minutes after you push back or after you start engines, the cabin should secure itself, because we don't always want to be reminding the cabin crew that they need to be ready to go. They kind of know their jobs. Geek Brunley, thanks very much for the follow, much appreciated. So on the taxi out, we're going to do the flight control checks. I'll bring up the systems page here and I'll simply go full up elevator, full down elevator. The Airbus doesn't run at 60 frames a second, it's more like 15. Full left aileron, full right aileron, and I'll push the button on the tiller and I'll operate the rudder pedals now. That's full left rudder and full right rudder. If I don't push the button as I put rudder input in, I get rudder fine steering on the real aircraft, and in the sim I'm getting tiller steering anyway. So once we've done the flight control checks, we put the auto brakes to maximum to signify that we've done that, and then it's a case of updating the briefing. If there's any change to the runway intersection, that we're going to use. We obviously want to talk about that before we enter the runway. Anything else of relevance, if it's a flex departure or if it's a toga departure, whether we're doing packs on, packs off, things that we would have mentioned in the brief, we'll just remind ourselves as we get out towards the runway. Yeah, the trim's almost always between 25 and 35. The aircraft is actually certified so that as long as it's in the green band, anywhere in the green band, you've got enough elevator authority to get airborne. So even if the trim should be fully aft and you've got it fully forward, or vice versa, it'll still work. Entering the runway, I'm going to put the strobe lights on, and because I'm lazy, I'm going to put all the lights on at the moment. And we're going to backtrack. There's no parallel taxiway here. Flex thrust shortens the service interval. That's bizarre. I don't understand that. So there's a specific warning on this runway not to do 180-degree turns on the runway. There's turning pads at both ends, and there's a very big displaced threshold at Hamburg. I'll use a little bit of the extension. We don't need the full thing. But we've got a little X-plane-ism down here. On the turning pad, wait for it. Where's my turning pad? Oh, look at that. Exactly what you want in the middle of your turning pad, a frangible light post. So what we'll do is we'll ignore the instructions and we'll do a 180-degree turn on the runway. Now this is a fairly long aircraft, but this runway is 45 metres wide between the shoulders, 45 metres from here to here. 321 can turn happily in 33 metres, the other aircraft can do it in 30 metres. The procedure for turning on the runway is actually defined in the operating manual. It's a 25-degree turn towards the runway edge. So that's going to be onto about 205, 204 degrees. We would always turn towards the side of the pilot flying. So if the captain's flying, we'd make the turn initially to the left, and if the first officer's flying, we make the turn initially to the right. And you'll see the geometry of that as we do it. Let's put I should put the radar on as well. It would probably be good practice. And the TCAS. Now we're ready to go. Take off. No blue. Right. Let us make a turn on the runway. So what I'm going to do is just slow it down to around about 5 knots or so. And I'm going to make that turn at about 25 degrees. That should do it. And I'm going to keep going until my eye point is almost exactly over the edge. In fact, what I'll do is I'll come all the way here and I'll just bring it to a stop and I'll hold it on the brakes just now. I'll have a look at outside. So that's why when it's the captain driving, we go left, and when it's the first officer, we go right. I'll make the turn now, and you'll see that it should come round quite nicely and be roughly on the centre line. On a 45 metre wide runway, it'll get to the centre line. On a narrower runway, you'll need to come back onto the centre line a little bit. And we are scrubbing the inside tyre a little bit, but it's not a bogey gear, so pivot turns are fairly okay with the aircraft. Right, and I'll just hold it on the brakes. So, ready to go. I'm going to apply a forward stick. I'm going to bring the power up to 50%, or 0.5, 50% N1. Release the brakes, and advance smoothly. Flex thrust, that's ManFlex 46 SRS runway. We've got auto thrust blue and thrust set. And keep an eye on that flex temp for you as well, Vinny. Doesn't seem to be increasing, doesn't it? 100 knots is checked. V1, rotate. 5 seconds, positive climb, gear up. So it's 5 seconds up to 15 degrees. Because we're so light, it's going to command a high pitch attitude. There's nav. I'll go lazy Airbus mode. AP1. And we're flying away. So at 1500 feet we'll get the lever climb prompt. There's climb and lever climb. So thrust climb with auto thrust at alt blue 5000. So here's that trap. If I bring this box up here so you can see it, the box is telling me I'll get 250 knots and the aircraft is telling me 210. Okay, so that's fine. It shouldn't be like that, but it's not really a danger at the moment because we can see what it's going to do. As long as we check the departure before we launch off, all will be well. So just keep it flaps 1 plus F until we're above S speed and positively accelerating. You should always be in the climb mode when you're cleaning up. If you're in the VS mode when you're cleaning up and you get a wind shift, there's no guarantee that it'll get above the green dot if we have an issue. But now it is above green dot. I'm going to pull for VS and set plus 1500. So speed, VS plus 1500, 1500 feet to go. I'm going to disarm the spoilers and I'm going to put the nose gear lights off. So why is this 210 knot thing an issue? Why does it matter? The fact that it's not shown on here. Well, if I had pre-selected a lower speed and I was now in selected speed mode, the only indication I've got anywhere on the system now is on the nav display. And if I took that into airports mode or forgot to turn constraints on, I wouldn't know what speed I was going to get when I push this knob in. You think you're going to get 250 knots, but you saw we'd only get 210 knots. And that's a real gotcha, I feel, in this aircraft. Now ultimately, there's Alt star, push the speed in, push the speed knob in, thank you, and then it goes up to 250 knots because it's sequenced the waypoints, so that's fine. The fly-by-wire flight envelope protection would look after you to a certain extent, but you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're depending on that. You know, you want to have your FMC screens telling you that you've got a potential problem there. Right, we are 250 knots, 5,000 feet, leaving Hamburg. This is ex-Europe running down there, I think. I installed it, it's like 13 gigs, so I hope it's doing something. Let me know, is that ex-Europe I'm looking at? I don't know how you would actually check that I've got it installed correctly. It does look like it follows the street patterns a bit better. Looks like ex-Europe. I knew I could count on Palm to tell me that. Excellent. Let's climb up to something closer to cruising altitude. Let's go all the way up to 38,000 feet. Why not? So, set standard. Standard set, checked 3 times. Thrust climb, open climb, alt blue, flight level 380. Let's just double check that I guessed correctly. Oh, 3938. Yeah, I saw a few things that look like power stations, Totorico. I think that's maybe the ex-Europe stuff. Outside temperature is 14 degrees, so no icing considerations there. This model is fairly sluggish in pitch. You can get quite out of speed when it's climbing away, especially at lighter weights. The real Airbus is a bit soft in pitch for sure, but it will respond enough to get the speed under control. It's not as sharp as some aircraft in pitch, but this model is very soft. Right, well, above the cloud layer, I'll switch the landing lights off. I don't need to wait to flight level 100. And off we go. We're on the way. So, the Airbus on a normal day out, as I've said many times, is a spectacularly easy aircraft to fly. The PFD symbology is very straightforward with the flap speeds. The automation really looks after you. And the autopilot, it's when you first get into an Airbus, it's quite different from what you have on the Boeing, but it's got everything you need in there, and it works in a fairly sensible, straightforward manner. Now climbing up to flight level 380. Now normally above flight level 100, if I wasn't in cloud and there was nothing on the weather radar ahead, I would happily switch the seatbelt signs off and let the passengers run around. With this light aircraft, I'm conscious of the fact that when we capture the 290 knot climb speed, I'm going to get a fairly high deck angle. So my kind of rule of thumb is if the deck is much above 10 degrees, I don't want to switch the seatbelt signs off. And if I'm manoeuvring on the departure, I don't want to switch the seatbelt signs off. So, you know, on a short flight, it helps the cabin crew out to get the seatbelt signs off a little bit earlier so they can get started and do what they need to do. But you've also got to be aware that, you know, you're sitting there with the deck up at 10 degrees. I mean, that's what, 7.5 degrees. Okay? Now, you imagine your business chap up here in seat 7 Delta, and he sees the seatbelt sign go off, he immediately stands up and picks out his big roller case out of the overhead to get his laptop and iPad and all his other junk out, and immediately drops the laptop case into the lap of the little old lady sitting behind him because he's lost his balance. And that happens all too frequently. People stand up, and it's only when they turn sideways and carry a bit of weight above their head that they lose their balance, and inevitably it gets dropped on the person behind them. So you have to be careful for things like that. In this case, we've captured the speed, the deck angle's fine, let's have those seatbelt signs off. Bing. Other thing on this, that I tend not to fly with weather, so I don't really notice it that much, but this WX All, that's for the, I can't remember the exact model number, it's the 4000 weather radar. It's got like a digital buffer where it slices up the radar picture to give you a processed radar picture. You've got an altitude knob and you can choose which altitude you want to look at. This radar should be showing a tilt indication. This is an old manual radar. It should be showing tilt rather than weather all. And on these ones, the multi-scan ones, you would usually have it set to +4 below flight level 200 and CAL above flight level 200. And the PWS switch, I don't even think it does anything, to be honest, on this. But off we go. We are on the way towards Nice. Quick check on the climb out. We've got 900 kilograms used on top of 6.8, takes us to about 7.7, 7.6, which is roughly what we wanted, what we expect to have, I should say. And on the flight plan, 3.5 tons, that's plenty. Hey Sandpatch, how's it going? Hope you're having a good evening. This is the Toliss A321. Pom, I think you said the, what do you say? You said the INI. Let me scroll back in the chat, see what I've missed here. Power. Oh, the CFMs are fairly noisy. The Neos with the LEAP engines, they're fantastic. The sound they make is awesome. I've only flown a 320 and a 321, not a 319 Neo. But I would imagine a 319 Neo with the engine's a lot closer to you. Sounds awesome. Right, Vinny, the engine rating on the takeoff, and I'm kind of hoping that Toto will help me out here because I'm not an engineer, I just fly the things. The rating, you've seen videos on the takeoff roll where the EPR rating increases, and I think the video you showed me was it had an N1, N2 and N3, so I don't know, maybe that's a Rolls-Royce engine, I don't know. But you saw the EPR rating increase during the takeoff roll and then start to slack off again, start to back off as the takeoff roll continued. So this is more like 727 kind of stuff, Toto, so fingers crossed we'll find some common ground here. But the what happens on the takeoff roll, because it's measuring the engine pressure ratio, you'll get a ram air effect at the front of the engine as the aircraft accelerates down the runway. You'll have an increase in pressure presented to the front of the engine without a major change down the back, so the EPR rating will change as you accelerate. And then it starts to back off again. the pressure increase, the ram air effect, will cause the EPA rating to drop off, and the increasing value you see is a function of the fuel flow increasing. So if you've got the FlyJSim 727 or the 737-200, the procedure on those engines is to advance the thrust levers till you get takeoff EPA, and it's usually around about 2.15, I think, or 2.10, something around that. But you keep adjusting the throttles all the way through the takeoff roll up to 80 knots. Once you get to 80 knots, you stop adjusting the power levers. So as you're rolling down the runway and you're moving those power levers forward, you're putting more and more fuel into the engine, and that is keeping the EPA rating where you want it to be. Now, obviously with these engines, that's all done automatically for you, and I think what you're seeing manifested on the EPA gauge when it increases on the takeoff roll, I think you're seeing that fuel flow increase on the early takeoff roll until it stops adjusting. So it increases as it's increasing the fuel flow, and then as the fuel flow stays constant and the airspeed increases, that ram air effect will reduce the EPA again. I think that's how it's working, but as I said, I'm not a propulsion engineer. I've never actually looked at it. As long as it's in the green arc or it's pointing at the... See, this is the Airbus simplicity for you here. You've got the donuts, which tell you where the thrust levers are, and you've got the little green thing, which is the calculated rating, and as long as it all lines up, it's no worries. Let's just go. Maybe I should look into that a bit more. Who knows? Did that make sense, Vinny? It's kind of a woolly explanation. I should also explain that I have probably been awake for something like 36 hours now. I'll give you a top tip. When you're about to go to sleep, don't start watching a rather compelling series on Netflix, because all will happen is you'll just binge it and then it'll be daylight and you won't want to go to sleep again. So that was my crime last night. But I highly recommend, if you're into 80s movies, I think you want to watch Cobra Kai. It's pretty good. Oh, we're flying on autopilot now, Captain Crash. This is easy. We've still got to do the Nice approach. Let's have a look outside. I love the look of the 321, and the Air France livery is pretty sharp, isn't it? Nap time. It's cup of tea time, or sandwich time, or whatever other slop we have made available for us. Did you see those pictures, Captain Crash, of the 321 passenger to freighter conversion? It's got the forward door. So where the SkyTeam logo is here, they've moved the forward door right the way forward to where the SkyTeam logo is on this aircraft. And if you have a look behind, let's just double check everything's working before I jump up and do bad stuff. Right, here we go. So through here, there is, there's the door, and there's the lavatory. So what they've basically done is taken this whole area here and made it where the container goes forward to. So I think the doorway is where the lavatory is, but then, your beverage makers are over here. They must have fitted a chemical toilet in this area here, because you've got to have somewhere to go to the toilet. The really early 320s, if you see 100 series, which is obvious because it doesn't have the wingtip fences. If you see a 100 series Airbus, they didn't have a water toilet system. They were mostly chemical toilets, which was awful. These ones have got proper plum toilets. Airspace grade diapers. I don't know. Maybe not. Don't think I'd like that. FS Bart, thanks very much for the follow, and C Northage, thanks for following. Good to have you on board. No, I don't. 321 is a freighter. It must be very marginal on the weight. There's 321. It's a good aircraft for what it does, but when it's fully loaded, it's a bit marginal. Oh yeah, the fighter pilots, they wear diapers, but yeah, they wear oxygen masks. You know, we're not talking about Doug Masters here. We're talking about airline pilots in shirt sleeves. Awesome. So when we get to the top of climb, we want to have a look at the top of descent position, because that's the first thing that's going to screw us up. We want to make sure that we know how long we've got in the cruise. On a short flight, I mean, Nice is an hour and a half, it's not overly long. If you're going down to the Canaries, which is about 4 hours from the UK, or you're going to Cyprus, that's about 4.5 hours, then yeah, you could chill out for a little bit. But it's always a good idea on a shorter sector to have a good look at where your top descent point would be. Oh, not the silica bags. Oh, is it silica they call it? There's this. I don't want to think about that. Racehorse. They've got a brevity code for going to the toilet. Unbelievable. Still. Now I'm just thinking about going to the toilet. I don't want to think about that. That's gross. I did 5. The longest I've been in a single-seat aircraft is 5 hours and 15 minutes, and it was a PZL. PZL, was it 50 or 51? PZL 50, I think it was. The Puchats, the Owl. And that's an uncomfortable aircraft to spend 5 hours and 15 minutes in. It got to the point where some of my thermal entries and exits were rather sporting to get it over to 0G. 7 hours 45. That doesn't sound comfortable. You can at least shuffle in the seat a little bit. That's a phenomenal distance in a DA-40. Was that a ferry trip or flying the hold? That Su-34 looks awesome, Pom. It's I imagine the cockpit. You ever see Broken Arrow? I imagine the cockpit on an Su-34 to be kind of like the cockpit from Broken Arrow. There's 1,000 feet to go. Oh my goodness. 3.5 hours out, 3.5 hours back. Nice. That's not what you want. At least you turn round. A lot of people would have forced it, so having the fuel to go back, that's the benefit of having those big fuel tanks. Those wing tanks are smaller than the PT-19 has, and the PT-19, yeah, you get about 4 hours out of it if you're really lucky. That would be cold though, wouldn't it? 4 hours in that. Especially in Norway. So the aircraft I've been showing in the video series, there's Mac Star. Let me concentrate on doing some pilot stuff first of all. Turn the tilt down and make sure that the top tip, don't touch the flaps when all you want to do is adjust the threat position to below. What was I talking about? I can't remember. Somebody remind me what I was talking about. Probably some nonsense. Oh yeah, it was the PT-19, the Spirit of Little Norway. The PT-19 doesn't have a canopy, it's an open top aircraft, and the Norwegian training camp was in Toronto. It's Toronto City Airport initially, and it was established over winter in the 1940s for these open cockpit aircraft to be used as primary trainers. Can you think of anything worse than getting into one of those aircraft on a snowy, wet, miserable November morning at like -8 or 9 degrees, and then sitting there for 2.5 hours just bumbling around trying to learn the primary effects of controls when your feet are freezing, your hands are freezing, and your entire face is starting to frost up? Wouldn't be nice. Probably much more pleasant in the summer flying air shows. Right, shall we have a look at the top of descent stuff, because I think that's one of the fairly interesting things on this flight. Who have we got in the chat at the moment? Let's see. Somebody was asking about this. Who have we got? We've got AT3N, good to see you. Casino, thanks. Commander Root, let's do this. Music. Pilsner, hey, how's it going? Didn't see you join us there. We've got Silly Gnome as well. Awesome. Thanks for joining me on the stream. Hope you're enjoying it so far. I-16 used to have a canopy, so bad the pilots just removed it. Oh my goodness. That's nasty. Yeah, these open top aircraft, open canopy aircraft, I'm kind of like, yeah, that would be nice for a half hour in the summer, on a summer evening when it's nice, but actually using it for a real job in the middle of winter, no thank you. I'm soft, I like to have the heating turned up. I'm actually just thinking about it. I'm going to turn the heating up for everybody because 20 degrees is making me feel cold. So, top of descent, we are going to have a look at the flight plan. Let's see if we can get everything I need on the screen here. I move this over there. I bring this up in the middle. And can I get that? Oh, it captures the keyboard. Right, let's have a look for... Right, so we are going to fly the arrival boardie. Is this the boardie? Come on, there we go. So, let's have a look at this here and on here. Into plan mode. Zoom in a bit further. So there's a lot of oddities on this approach that really the Airbus automation isn't great with, to be honest. I don't think any automation is good on the NICE approach. So first things first, it's RNAV Alpha we're going to fly. It's not aligned with the runway, so the final stages for the approach are visual. We're coming in from Bordy here. We're going to fly down towards this turning point, turn just before Amgel here, down towards Mikru, and then it takes us out to Piram and then Neres. Now look, this is what, 34 miles? So 34 miles out here, across, and then 30 odd miles back towards the airfield. That's a lot of extra track miles we've got on the system at the moment. Okay? We can say with almost certainty that we are not going to fly those extra track miles. Okay, we're going to get taken down here, just sequence there. We're going to get taken down here and put on an air traffic vector turned downwind. We're going to make the approach routing north. This waypoint here is called Bisbo, north onto the final approach, and then land on 04. So maybe the furthest waypoint we get to would be Mikru. Okay, so how are we going to sort that out? How are we going to work it out? There's a couple of different ways of doing this. We can do it the old-fashioned way, the fixed method. So I know from experience that Bisbo is really, I want to be Bisbo at 3,000 feet. Okay, so what I could do first and foremost is I could put a fix on here. I could put Bisbo in. So if Bisbo, well, it's not Biz, there we go, Bisbo. If Bisbo is at the 10 mile point, 3,000 feet 10 miles, then if I put another 10 miles on there, that would get me a 6,000 feet point to aim at. Okay, so if I cross this blue arc at 6,000 feet and 250 knots, that would leave me in good shape managing the energy for the approach. Okay, that would be the old school way of doing it. I'll leave that in there just for information because it's a useful bit of knowledge to have. It doesn't matter where I am on that arc or which way I'm flying, I've got 10 miles to fly to Bisbo, I can lose 3,000 feet comfortably, or 2,000 feet and a little bit of speed. Okay, but there's a better way of doing it, and you can use this technique at any airfield. Lots of German airfields have got what's called lateral holding, where you fly a big S pattern in the sky, and then you actually simply get to this waypoint, cross over to the final approach, and you're in. So we're going to use the secondary flight plan. I'm going to use the secondary, I'm going to copy the active. And then what I'm going to do is scroll down until I get to the waypoint I'm interested in. In this case we said Mikru, and after Mikru I'm simply going to put in Bisbo. Okay, Mikru to Bisbo. And it draws the track on there. Now if I've got both flight plans, which it should show me, you can see that that's 10 minutes and around about 45 miles. That's a huge difference to lose. Okay, but this is what I've been cleared for. The primary flight plan is what I've been cleared for. So I don't want this on the system. I don't want to leave the aircraft in the state that it would fly that approach if I wasn't fully on top of it. But what I can do is work it back. So if I was to scroll back to AMGEL, and let's bring the other one up so you can see them simultaneously. This is the advantage of having two separate systems. If I get AMGEL, you can see that we've got flight level 110 is the minimum altitude on that sector. That's what we've got on here. That's happy coincidence, isn't it? If I was to put that as a hard limit, say flight level 110 on the secondary, it wouldn't make any difference. Okay, but there's nothing to stop me moving this 110 onto the primary as well. So if I move it back a bit further, check my top of descent now is at 1633. This is the shortest track and this is the optimal track. Let's put so let's go in here, flight level 110. Move that screen a bit, 110, and then on the flight plan it should calculate a better top of descent. I go 30. Okay, so with this top of descent position, with this altitude constraint over AMGEL, we know that we've calculated back that 11,000 feet over AMGEL would let us fly the shortcut. So I've put that constraint on the primary flight plan. So use the secondary to test out a theory and then find a common point and put an altitude constraint on there. That's really a very effective way of doing it. Okay, and that'll work at any airfield. The good thing about Nice is there's another solution for Nice. Let me see if I can find the chart. Do we have the body? Nope. Let's try the approach charts. We're looking for the initial approach for Bisbo. Is there an initial approach for Bisbo? Oh, there we go. Look at this. There's an initial approach. It says from AMGEL, flight level 900 is the minimum altitude over AMGEL, and that will take us down straight into Bisbo. So we could ask for that. We could load it on the secondary and have it ready to go. In this case, I'm simply going to load it so we can see the difference. So change the arrival over. Should be able to choose a transition via, we put that via AMGEL and insert. We then have a top descent. Let me fix that. It shouldn't do that, but hey ho. Tone the body, that's fine. So AMGEL, again flight level 110, top of descent is back in the normal place, and now we've got the straight track, get rid of that. And we've got the straight track out from AMGEL, down and turn and back in again. So that's pretty good at Nice that we've got that option there. But as a general rule, use your secondary flight plan to work out where your top descent point should be for the worst case scenario, and leave the primary flight plan loaded for the most plausible scenario. So in the green here is what you're expecting to do, but you've got a lower altitude constraint on there, or a more conservative altitude constraint to accommodate any track shortening. One of the nice features the real thing has got is the ability to put a time waypoint in. So if, let me find my top descent, what was it, 1630? So let's say I want to put a reminder in at 1630, I could simply put in 1630 and put it onto lateral revision anywhere, and it would actually load 1630 as a pseudo waypoint, so that we'd have a reminder on the screen here and on the nav display that there was something coming up that we needed to do. So hope that makes sense. Top descent management, we've basically got the aircraft set now so that the vertical navigation will take us roughly to the vicinity of the airfield and get me down to flight level 100 at the appropriate point. From that point onwards, it's just a case of eyeballing it using the vertical speed, because you don't really know what air traffic's going to give you. Does that make sense? look back through the chat here, see what we got. Just going to turn the microphone off for a wee second, hang on. Now I'm back with you. So this is Karlsruhe coming up. Dresden, Repus, so we've got Zurich around there. It would be really useful if the developers filtered these airfields out, because you know, you don't need to see every grass strip in Germany with the airports. Just somewhere that you can land the airplane at. So the airport screen is largely useless on this aircraft. We'd normally have airports selected above flight level 100 just to help with waypoint planning, with diversion planning. You want to see the waypoint screen, Captain Crash? There you go. That's pretty useful, isn't it? I don't even know why they bother with that screen on the aircraft. AORs, a bit better. NDBs. Come on, we still have NDBs in Europe. Look at that. Constraints is the only way to go. So we've got terrain on this aircraft as well, which is pretty useful. Put the terrain display on. And it's going to plot the terrain. We're flying over the Alps at the moment. Or we'll fly over the Alps on this route, overhead Zurich down towards Milan. What it's showing us on the terrain display is the highest elevation it's rendering at 13,100 feet. Does anybody know anything about the option system on the Airbus? How long we have on the option system for the passengers and for the crew? Place your bets. Let me know how long you think the option system works. While you're having a think about it, the flight crew have got option bottles basically that supply the option masks. But what the crew have got is portable oxygen, and what the passengers have got is what's called a chemical generator. Basically, it's a self-contained device that produces a lot of heat and smells. Yeah, you're pretty close, Pilsner. It's about 15 minutes. It varies depending on the aircraft fit. You can have longer option systems fitted if you continually operate over high terrain. Smells like burning denim. Yeah, I've had the option masks on a few times, the flight crew option masks on a few times, and that's not pleasant. You end up with a sore throat, and it's like having your viewpoint, you know, your field of view really narrowed down, so you can't really see, you know, much. You always have to turn your head to speak to your colleague. It's not a pleasant place to be. But for the passengers, it's nasty. With the option system on, it really makes the cabin environment pretty horrible. It'll keep you alive, but it's not a pleasant thing. Certainly, you wouldn't want to be using the option masks if there was smoker fumes in the cabin, because you know it's a mixer option system. It's not a pure pressure option system, so it just gets worse and worse. But yeah, you've got about 15 minutes on the option system as standard on the Airbus. What flight level do we have to descend down to? There's your next question. If I have a depressurization, how far down do we have to go? What level do I have to descend to? There's a couple of answers. Who's going to guess? I'll give you a minute. You have a think about it. Bearing in mind, in this case here, the terrain is up to 13,100 feet, and over Mont Blanc, which is just to the west of here, it's about 17. So the option system, we've got to descend down to 14,000 feet within the time, within the lifespan of the passenger option system. Okay, so from the service ceiling at 39,000 feet down to around about 18,000 feet can be as little as 5 minutes. It can be less than that if you've got the speed brake and you wind the speed up. But we've got to be down below 14,000 feet in, what did I say, 12 minutes? 12 minutes. What that means is, yeah, 14 was your guess. That's suspicious now. Very suspicious. So if I was over the Alps, and I was over Mont Blanc, and Mont Blanc was 17,000 feet, I would have to descend to two different arches. I'd have to go down to 18,000 feet, and we'd level off at 18,000 feet, and then you tell everybody over the PA to keep the masks on, because at 18,000 feet, if you take the masks off, people will be in trouble. Old people will be in trouble. Yeah, MSA plus some value, that's exactly correct. If it's over high terrain, or it's especially windy, you would descend down to MSA plus 2,000 feet, otherwise it's MSA plus 1,000 feet. Varies between airlines, but that's fairly common amongst a lot of them. So I go down to 18,000 feet, I can stay at 18,000 feet for around about 12 minutes, and then I've got to start the descent down to 14,000 feet. Once I get down to 14,000 feet, the passenger oxygen system, the chemical generators, will have run out of oxygen at that point. So the passengers will be breathing the ambient air in the cabin. So we do carry oxygen bottles, so the cabin crew are on portable oxygen systems, like liquid oxygen systems. They can then share out, if you like, some of those spare oxygen systems for elderly, infirm, or people like pregnant passengers where their respiratory system is already working a little bit harder. But the crew have to keep their masks on. So anything above flight level 100, the crew keep their masks on throughout. So you end up with this situation where you finish your emergency descent. The customers, the passengers, can take their masks off, but the flight crew have got to keep their masks on. And if you get an inexperienced cabin crew and you have that sort of situation, that could get quite nasty as well. How many oxygen masks do we have in the lavatories on an Airbus A320? There's a question for you. Forward lavatory has got how many oxygen masks? It's not a PG-13 question. Why do you think 2, Oisin? You're right. 2 is the right answer. I'm going to have to go and look in the toilet. That's the one. Mother and baby. Good job. Does it have it modelled? Let's have a look. No. Oh, no study level toilets on this aircraft. But yeah, over the back of the toilet you've got a changing table that folds down for the baby. There's not a lot of space in those toilets for the other thing, allegedly. Right, so here we are. We are just approaching, where's this, Karlsruhe? How far have we got to go? An hour to go. Top descent is in 35 minutes. You only need a study level toilet on board a U-boat simulator. Submarine toilets must be the most incredibly complicated things in the world. And I think getting it wrong on that would be very unpleasant very quickly, getting those valves out of sequence. So we've got another 5 or 10 minutes in the cruise before we have to look at the approach and brief the approach. Is there anything else you want to know about the Airbus? Any other questions you've got at the moment? Anything else you want to see on it? I can show you some of the visual oddities. A U-boat captain almost sank his own U-boat because he didn't follow the toilet. Nasty. I don't even know the mechanics of how that would work. So it's fairly common on A320 aircraft to have the toilet system. I don't know why we're talking about the toilets. Who started this? Was it? I think it was probably me. The toilets get blocked up fairly easily Why do you think the toilets get blocked on an aircraft? If you've had a flight delayed because the toilets are blocked, what do you think causes that? Black water barrels. I suppose, I mean, that's a fairly clever way of doing it, really, isn't it? Your waste remains neutral ballast. What do you think causes the most common reason for toilets to get blocked on an aircraft? Oisin probably knows the answer. Diapers, sand patch, good job. So the plumbing system on the Airbus, let's have a look through here. We have got, on a normal Airbus, an older production Airbus, we've got one toilet forward on the left hand side, and as we go aft, you're an Airbus toilet expert. Is there any follow up to that? Is it going to get demonetized? Let's have a look. So underneath my feet at the moment, as I'm walking down here, is the main plumbing system to the waste tank at the rear of the aircraft. It's quite a walk, isn't it? And this aircraft has got the toilets on the back. You sometimes get the toilets fitted left and right. On the 319s they can be fitted left and right, but on the newer galleys they're fitted in the back, and these toilets are tiny. When you've got the toilets fitted left and right, you've got basically a big T-piece that joins the two toilets, so it comes across here and then descends down into the tank. And you've also got a tube that runs front to rear all the way back into this T-piece and then goes through a 90-degree bend down into the waste tank. So if you put a diaper down the toilet at the front and then push the flush button, the cabin pressurization, the pressure differential I should say, will accelerate that diaper to quite some speed, such that when it gets that 90-degree bend at the back, not all of the contents of the diaper will make it into the catch tank, and eventually the tank gets blocked up. The U-bend, the 90-degree angle gets all blocked up. Study level toilet sims is the next thing on an aircraft. (737) toilets are a bit smaller, I think. They seem smaller. Let's have a talk about something other than toilets. Let's see, what is there of interest on this system down here? I'm running out of interesting Airbus trivia. What is there to look at? Bleed systems, that's fairly common, isn't it? Oh, actually, that's an interesting question. So, Toto is still in the channel. If we consider this compared to a Challenger, I put the wing anti-ice on, you see it opens the anti-ice valves, but it's still running off the IP system. It's only if I make a power reduction that the HP valves would open. The wing anti-ice doesn't have any bearing on the HP or the LP, the HP or IP valves. On the Challenger, I believe, they're two separate systems. You've got the, remind me, is it the 14th in the 10 stage or the 13th in the 10 stage? In fact, Captain Crash, you'll know this as well. And one of them runs the air conditioning system, and the other one runs the bleed system. That runs the anti-ice system, yeah? 10 and 14. So, one of them runs the pressurization, and the other one runs the anti-ice. Excellent. So, on the Airbus, you can potentially, if you have an engine shutdown and you've pushed the fire handle, you can end up losing the anti-ice on half the wing. It's not a great design. You can also have a lot of pack contamination if you have to use the fire system. The Airbus tries to be very simple in its arrangement, but sometimes that simplicity makes it harder in the abnormals. What's the 7th stage bleed on the CRJ for? Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. High and low pack demand. So yeah, I often wonder why the anti-ice wasn't done on a separate tapping, but you know, different systems. Just have a quick run through it, make sure everything's okay. We didn't really care, nothing you could do to change it. Like, yeah, that's some knowledge for the technical quiz every year, or for the initial type rating quiz, and once you've learned that you can promptly forget about it. Awesome. Where are we now? Good idea if you're flying overhead some mountains to know roughly what mountains there are, because if you don't tell people on the PA what mountains they are, the cabin crew will come and ask you, what mountains are those? You can say, are green ones? No idea. Well, there's that. There was an ex-scenery kind of wind farm thing down there, and I missed it due to cloud cover. Oh well. Yep. 50 miles or so to go to Trasdingen, overhead Zurich, and then on we go. So before we cross that high terrain, we'd have discussed with our colleague what we're going to do, what altitude we're going to have for the drift down altitude, as we were talking about previously. So today probably 16 or something would do. That would mean that we'd level off at 16, keep the masks on, keep the passenger masks on, and then continue flying north or south until we can descend again. But because the Alps are very narrow north to south, there isn't a specific drift down procedure that we have to carry out, depressurization procedure. You can just plan it on a day. Some other routings, if you go across central Turkey for example, they've got very high, sustained high MSAs to the point where a depressurization could be a real issue. So you've got specific escape procedures in those scenarios. There's lots of things like that on the aircraft for those of you reading the chat, but there's lots of bits of knowledge about the aircraft that the manufacturers decide the pilots don't really need to know about. There's almost like there's a sweet spot for technical knowledge on an aircraft. You've got to know the aircraft well enough to operate it, and you've got to know it well enough to make competent decisions with the aircraft. If you know the technicalities of the aircraft too much, then you can end up almost going round in circles trying to make decisions based on something that may happen rather than what the aircraft is actually exhibiting. So with a lot of technical knowledge, the manufacturers can keep that back from pilots to a certain extent. Right. Nearly there. What did my secondary plan say for my time of arrival? The secondary plan, did I undo it? Oh, we've broken it. Perfect, 1654. Is Amy still in the chat? Are you still there, Amy? Oh, you are. How are things going with the UNS, Amy? You having fun with that? Is it challenging? Is it enjoyable still? And this is airline flying, folks. Just sitting here watching it fly itself. You can see why in the sim I quite enjoy having the VOR or the INS to look after in the cruise, because otherwise we're just really babysitting the aircraft at the moment. Great thing about the Airbus, I said in the previous stream as well, there's no stick here. I can put my feet up off the cold floor, can recline the seat a little bit and just relax, watch it fly itself. Is the Neo noticeably quieter in the sim as well, Sandpatch? What I like about the Neo is the fact they're all a lot newer, so you don't have rattles from the aircraft quite so much. Oh, that's good, yeah. There's lots of little bits and pieces on the Airbus that rattle. I don't know if they've modelled it on here. So these are metal panels on top of the glare shield here, and they usually rattle around on the takeoff roll. There's these little triangular panels here. These get out of position and rattle around. There's a map light that's usually hanging off. So on the ground it's really quite a rattly aircraft. Most aircraft are. But the Airbus has got this kind of French car feeling. You've got this is like a plastic trim that sits on top of the metal panel underneath. So you can see the panel and then the plastic trim. It's like a Renault from the 1980s. It's got the similar sort of build quality. So when they're a couple of months old, these plastics distort a little bit and they stick out, and there's dust and grime gets in behind them, so it can be they can be quite untidy looking if you don't have a good cleaning team on them. I don't know about the Pratts, Oshin. I know about the LEAP engines. They are phenomenal. The best thing about the Neo from a flying perspective for the 321 is you've got much more flap available. The flap full position is a much higher amount of flap, a much higher deflection angle on the flaps than you have on the 321 with the old engines. I think the 321 with the old engines is a bit underpowered at maximum weights, so to offset that, or to make the weight altitude temperature limits bearable for the aircraft, it's got limited flap deflection. That means it lands quite nicely because it lands a bit faster, but sometimes you want the extra 15 knots, or the 15 knots less on the approach speed. So it's good for that. The other great thing about the Neo engines is they've got lower idle thrust than these. So at idle they put out less power out the back, and they've also got a larger surface area. So a CFM aircraft it slows down okay. An IE doesn't really slow down that well at all. It seems to have higher idle thrust. The Neos, when you bring the Neos back, they will slow down quite nicely. It's maybe about 500 foot per minute difference that a Neo will need an extra 500 foot per minute descent to maintain speed compared to an IE. So if you end up a little bit higher, the Neo can sort you out. Yeah, we always have. I guess it depends. Some companies you have your own headset. Some companies you have shared headsets. But even so, almost all airlines provide sanitizing wipes. Even before COVID, you'd have sanitizing wipes provided for the crew, so that you can give the stick and the thrust levers and the keyboard a nice wipe down, get rid of all the grot from it. We've got screen cleaning wipes as well. They give us screen cleaning wipes for the TFT and the glass screens. So every time I see a sim model with dusty screens, I'm like, we're not savages. We can clean our screens. Just give me clean screens in the sim, for goodness sake. A little amount of dust is okay, but the rotate MD-80, that is just a bit overboard. I mean, you would send it back. You'd get the engineers out to clean it. Yeah, Captain Crash, it's the same sort of thing. What most companies do, I'm led to believe, is that the cleaners are allowed to hoover the floor on the flight deck. You get carpeted floor on the Airbus, luxury. So the cleaners will hoover the floor, but they're not allowed to do the panel here. You need the engineering team to come and do the panel. Can we see any nice Alpine scenery? This is just, this isn't ortho photo. I've only got ortho for the UK areas at the moment. But I remember the Alps looking really nice in X-Plane 10. Well, some pilots bring brushes with them to brush crumbs and stuff onto the floor. It gets a bit excessive. Just concentrate on putting the food into your mouth. It's easier that way. They've paid for Substance Painter. How much is Substance Painter? So that's the tool that lets you paint the, I believe it lets you paint the liveries in the wrapped position rather than unwrapped. Is that correct? I might be talking rubbish there. Subscription. Goodness. I mean, it's not too bad, but that's a lot for a single product, really, isn't it? It does seem better with X-Europe. I don't know if I'm maybe just sleep deprived now, but it does look, it looks nicer. I've not done any repainting. The last thing I did any painting for was I started modelling a shorts Skyvan for Flight Sim 2004 in Gmax. Was it Gmax you used to get on the Flight Sim 2004 disc? And I got to the point that I had a fleshed out 3D model. I mean, I say a 3D model, it was like a plane maker model, but the flight dynamics kind of worked. There was no turboprop engine for Flight Sim 2004 that really worked, so my textures were just really slapped on. I'm not very good at that sort of stuff. I wish I could do that. I wish, you know, I'm in awe of people like Totoriko and Goran who can see things in their mind, and Captain Crash, the Hindenburg looks awesome, and you see these things in your mind and then you make them come to life. It's somewhat childish of me to sit here and complain about the fact that they've given us 4 pitot heads rather than 3 pitot heads. I can complain about that, but I mean, realistically, I couldn't do any better. I couldn't even do 10% of what these people have done with this aircraft. So I can pick holes in it, but I can't step up to the plate and do any better. And when you think about it that way, it's pretty good. Having the second pitot head on the co-pilot side though is a bit silly. Oh no, I can say it's wrong, but it never feels, well, what's the word? I'm always careful with my videos on the channel. I used to show a fair bit of freeware content on the channel, and I would go out of my way not to criticise a freeware aircraft, because there's just no need for that. I don't like reviews where people are critical of an aircraft that they've been given for free. I don't mind talking about where it's not quite right, but in that case, if I can improve it, I'll do that. So for example, the Zlin 142, the fuel system doesn't work properly on that aircraft when you get it out of the box. The outboard fuel tanks don't transfer correctly to the inboard fuel tanks, and it's an easy fix. So I didn't even mention in the video, I just sent the fix off to the developers and hoped they would put it back in again. What's wrong with the pitos, Totoriko? There's one too many of them. They have mirrored it from one side to the other. So you've got 3 pitot systems on the Airbus. You've got the captains, you've got the first officers, and you've got the standby. And then you've got this chap here, which is not on the real thing. And these are the temperature probes. I think these are the older probes. You've now got an aspirated probe on the Airbus, but that's the tap probe there. If I was to be really picky, oh God, I'm going to be really picky now. This aircraft's got what's called the modified brake system. It's got the newer brakes, the newer screens. This is the fuel filling selector door, and whenever you've got, it was called 320 enhanced. They fixed a lot of design flaws with the 320, and one of those flaws is this door opens down, whereas on the new aircraft it opens forward, so that if the catches fail, the door just gets blown to the closed position. whereas on this aircraft, if the catches fail, the door departs the aircraft and ends up in a field in Germany. So that should be different as well. But that's just a texture. You know. It's not a 3D model of the quality that we've seen from Goran and some of the other developers, but it's very serviceable, and I think it's it feels like a more rounded package than the Flight Factor aircraft. The Flight Factor FMGC is probably still marginally better, but the frame rates on this, I mean, this is running on my potato, and I've got X-Europe, and I've got 2 cloud layers, and fairly long distance visibility, and it's getting 38 frames a second with no optimizations on there. Pretty good. We should probably have a look at this approach, because I'm yattering away here. So we've got the thing loaded already to take us down to, let me pop everything out, taking us down to the Mike November 910, 930, around the corner to Bisbo, and then from Bisbo we're going to fly the approach. I was on the page, wasn't I? We're going to fly the RMP Alpha 04 left or right. Is that one there? Oh, I should probably close some of these. Right. So we're going to fly the Bisbo arrival. So coming in from Bisbo on the 354 radial, we're going to capture the glide slope of the glide path at 3,000 feet. So although the aircraft is planning at the moment on being Bisbo at 3,900 feet, for this sort of non-precision approach, I'm not going to mess around with it. I'm simply going to tell it to be at Bisbo at 3,000 feet. I want my life to be straightforward. So I'm changing above 3,000 to at 3,000. Did everybody stay in there? I just got a glitch on my laptop. Just somebody let me know in the chat that you're still connected. That would be awesome. Maybe it's just a skip. Yep, awesome. Thanks, Captain Crash. Cool. So where were we? Yeah, I want to be down at 3,000 feet at Bisbo. And then the final approach fix is 04 Alpha, and then it's down a 3-degree path down towards the minimum descent altitude, which is 2,000 feet onto the missed approach point. So it's simply a 3-degree path from 3,000 down to 2,000 feet. Yeah, it does have the EFB on the side Pilsner. I prefer it. It's at a funny angle for me. I don't really like it down there, so I prefer the pop out. So again, the FMGC is not showing all the information we need. It should be showing between the FN04 Alpha and the MN04 Alpha a -3 degrees in this section here. You have to be able to see what the FMGC is going to do before you ask it to do it. Okay, and this aircraft doesn't have that. Now, I've test flown it. It does it, but it would be nice to know that it's going to do it before you do it. Fox November 04 Alpha, Mike November 04 Alpha, and Mike November is the missed approach point. So we can see that Mike November, there's the missed approach, and the runway's down here. So we've got to do the rest of the procedure visually, and it probably has the visual approach bits on here as well. Are they on the airport? Where would you put them? Where would you put them? That wouldn't be an airport. Approach. Initial approach, RNAV. VPT, there we go. VPT after RNAV Alpha. So if we're visual, we continue on this 354 radial until we turn right onto 043 to land on 04 right. Okay, so I need the CGS tuned just as a reference. Let's do that just now. CGS. I'll put it on this side. I'll put it on both sides just for clarity. And it is 354. So why am I loading a VOR radio when it's an RNAV procedure? So at Nice, we're doing this to keep the aircraft away from the expensive homes the expensive houses are here. This is Cap Antibes, I think. Cap Ferrat, Antibes. Basically the ILS, you don't use the ILS unless you really have to. You'll get a noise fine. You have to fly this visual procedure. So we descend down to 2,000 feet, and if we're visual we continue, and if we're not visual we fly the missed approach. Now, that gets us into a completely different method of working than what you're maybe used to with the Airbus. How are we going to make it transition from final app into this visual approach? So let me talk you through the FMAs. We're going to have speed, final app, and initiated. And we're going to be descending from 3,000 feet down towards 2,000 feet on the profile with flaps and gear already out. We either have to tell the aircraft to turn for the missed approach, or we have to tell it to continue. Okay, so to tell it to continue, what I'm going to do, if I become visual, is I'll pull the knob here to put it into track mode. Okay, and then I'll keep flying. When it goes into track, the vertical side will revert to FPA. And I can keep flying a 3-degree path. You can see this bit here. I can basically fly 3 degrees visually away from the Mike November 04 Alpha, turn right onto track and land on the runway. So that should be fairly straightforward. Mod on the Airbus have got a feature called Nav in Go Around. It's a requirement of doing radius to fix work that you're fitted for Nav and Go Around. This aircraft doesn't appear to do Nav and Go Around, so when I get into Go Around mode it'll give me straight ahead. So I go down to 2,000 feet and I'm not visual and I have to go around. I will already be beyond the missed approach point, so I'll have to do the turn manually. I'll pull heading, turn right onto a heading of about 140 degrees and then ask it for direct to the next waypoint, and that should all work out. There's two cases: visual, continue; not visual, go around. The instrument missed approach procedure is straightforward. We just have to do a few more actions on it, and it's at quite a high altitude as well, 2,000 feet up to 3,000 feet. If we're on the visual segment, we're tracking down 043 and then somebody taxis onto the runway ahead of us. We have to fly what we call a rejected landing procedure, and that's why I've tuned the CGS on here. You see, we just fly runway heading up to 3,000 feet and turn at 5D from the CGS. So there's a fair bit to think about on this approach. So let's load the minima. It's 2,000 feet. It's a high minima. It's flat full I'm using. I know that it's 1013 because I've got automatic digital brain ATIS. Keep life simple by using ISA conditions. And nil wind, because if you've got control of the wind, would you not have nil wind? On the next phase, we need to put in a sensible altitude for the engine acceleration. I wouldn't be accelerating level at 410 feet at least, that would be silly, so 1,000 feet will do. Yeah, soft go around it would be useful for this. If we do go around, it will ask me to come straight back into lever climb straight away. But yeah, the go around gets quite exciting. So does everybody listening understand the different missed approaches that or the three different events that could happen when we get to the minimums? We can either go around from minimums, which involves the standard go around actions followed by pulling for heading and turning right. We could pull for heading and fly below the minima for the visual part of the approach, and then we could go around at some point on this part here, fly ahead to 5 DME and then turn. It used to be the VOR Alpha. When they changed it over to the RNAV Alpha, they should have really recoded the procedure. It's a crappy procedure, to be quite honest. The way they get around it in Nice is simply by not using the procedure if the weather's marginal. I've never gone around at Nice so far on this approach for not being visual. Because of the visibility, if the ceiling's much below 4,000 feet, they'll use the ILS instead, or the straight-in approach instead. But it's fairly complicated. And what's really frustrating is the aircraft knows how to get to the runway. You know, you could fly ahead and put a radius to fix in, and it'd get all the way through runway quite happily in final lap. And all you have to do is intervene if you want to fly the missed approach. And if you have a look at the charts for Salzburg, Salzburg runway 33, it's got two different approaches, one of which is the radius to fix and the other one's a visual procedure, but the coding is identical on them. You'd kind of hope with a French aircraft at a French airport that the automation or the procedure would be better optimized, but it's one of the more fiddly ones, if you like, because you can get it spectacularly wrong very quickly. Runway 22 is even harder at Nice. At 04 it's quite an easy turn on. On 22 you go down to 1200 and something feet and then fly level for a mile and a half or so and then turn left, and it's a much steeper turn on 22 because of how the terrain is. If we're going in on 04 it's just ahead and right. Going in on 22 it's more of a 90-degree turn, and you can see there's a lot less space to manoeuvre in this. So it's still marked on this chart, let me see. There you go. The hospital, your missed approach for a rejected landing is passing this hospital. Well, I was thinking about that, Pilsner. You know what? Actually, this is one of the really good things about the Toliss, and having never had an aircraft that really does save states properly, I didn't really appreciate what that would bring to the simulator. I can quite happily save the state. In fact, if you look here, it's almost like I've been practicing this before to make sure it does it correctly. But I can save the state on the approach, and then we can go back in and try it again. So we can do the landing, reposition the approach, and off we go again. And it will do it straight away. If you've actually got the reversers out or the engine shut down, you'll probably have to reposition twice to get everything sorted out. But once you've done that, it's fairly good. I'm going to use operate low for the approach. Let me just, I'll be quiet for a second to just double check I've set everything that I should have done. 013. Brilliant. Should be good. So this is where I'm really interested to see how the Challenger behaves. I'd like to fly the Nice approach in the Challenger as well, because it's interesting to see how the automation works on the aircraft. I don't know what that is. Nice. The Italian lakes are beautiful. In winter especially, they're beautiful. The nav display isn't what you see, is what you get. Really? Oh my goodness. So it'll quite happily not follow the track? So one of the guaranteed ways to generate an overspeed warning in the Airbus is to use descent mode from 38,000 feet. It just isn't great. What we would normally do, what I would normally do, I want to say everybody does it this way. Let's say I'm going down to flight level 120. I'll start the descent with a reasonable 10-15 miles to go. There we go, there's Mach descent. Because I've descended early, it's going to stay in Mach mode and target the speed target here. If I did it right on top of the decel point, it would almost certainly end up running right towards the top end of this bracket to regain the profile, and you're only 2 or 3 knots from an overspeed. So if you're going to use descent mode, use it early, use it 10-15 miles before the top of descent. If you are kept high by air traffic, what you would do is dial the speed back so that you take the energy out of the aircraft even in the cruise altitude, and then when you do get the descent you can increase that speed and build up the rate of descent again. There's no turn anticipation drawn on the Collins. Well, that's going to make it fairly, well, it should be easier to draw, I guess, but yeah, it's a bit weird. I'm sure Amy said that the UNS system, it did turn anticipation, but it only drew it for the next waypoint, not for all of them. Can't remember. So does everybody in the stream, apart from Toto, do you all have the A321? Are you all enjoying it? I'm pleasantly surprised by it. I have good fun with it. I'm enjoying the 300 as well. It's odd. I know there's issues with the aircraft. But it's quite compelling to fly. I think it's because it's a mix of one thing and the other. Oh, it doesn't do turn anticipation. Maybe I was thinking about something else. Yeah, so what I'm going to do, Pom, is I'm going to hopefully get some time to get a list of issues with the aircraft written up. I'm going to try and be reasonable with it. You could pick holes in any model. I want to focus on things that actually affect how you use the aircraft. So things like the FMGC stuff is what really matters to me, and how the FMA modes enunciate. It does something else slightly weird that you can live with it. It's drawing these bottom of descent arrows. It's showing a magenta bottom of descent arrow and then a blue top of descent arrow. It's implying it's going to level off at 17 and then start the descent again. But it's not going to do that. So I'm just looking at the stream chat here. It has moderated one of Oshin's messages because it thinks CFM sounds sexual. That was weird. There you go, with the CFM sound pack, it's great. I must be out of touch these days. Right, yeah, I quite like the 321. I'm having a lot of fun with it. There's thrust idle. I'm not getting into that. I found out do you remember on the first stream we had that kind of weird drumming noise on the takeoff roll? There was a setting for it. Let me sound add-ons. 3D sound fading. If you don't turn on 3D sound fading, you hear the landing gear like it's sitting right next to you. So you need 3D sound fading, otherwise it doesn't work. Or it doesn't do it right, apparently. That's what was causing it sounded like there's a gorilla inside a metal box behind the flight crew. So do you like this sort of stream? It's different from the videos. With the video series, I always try to get you a little bit of value for money for the videos. You're going to listen to me for 45 minutes or 30 minutes. I want to show you something different on each video. So it was a real challenge when, with the SR22, I was finding it difficult to keep it interesting, if you like, because at the back of my mind I'd already shown you all the G1000 stuff that I know with the TBM series, so I didn't want to cover that ground again. So featuring the Toliss aircraft in another set of Airbus videos would be basically the same thing over again as what you've seen with the Flight Factor, because fundamentally it's very similar. But in the streams, if we do it as a stream, it can be a little bit more relaxed. We can talk about stuff that's interesting on the cruise without having to worry about it being a bit wasteful as far as the viewing minutes goes. What do you think? Do you like streams like this instead of or as well as the videos? I quite like doing the videos because I watch the videos myself. If I have a time away from an aircraft like the Tu-154, I'll use the videos to try and remember what to do with it. I actually don't know if you can hear the PTU from the flight deck. I need to listen out for it. I think you probably can. The most obvious thing when you have an abnormal, if you end up doing the flight control checks, driving the elevator through the PTU, that causes the whole airframe to vibrate. You can always spot that if you're a passenger. If you see the control surfaces moving after engine start, they probably have a ELAC or ELAC or a SEC fault that they've deferred, and they're having to check that out as they go. Can you hear the APU? The PTU? Probably. Don't know. Maybe I've just filtered it out. Maybe I'm going deaf. I need to put real pilot in the stream title. Rookie mistake. The reason I don't do that is because I was a sim pilot for, goodness, I started flying PC flight simulators in 1991, and I started flying airplanes in 2002. So I would consider myself to be a sim pilot first and foremost in this environment. I'm bringing the whole concept in the channel was to bring some of the reality of operating an aircraft to the simulator, not to do everything exactly by the book, not to go hardcore on the simulation aspects of it, because other people do that, and you know, I have great respect for people that do that, but for me, I just want to get airborne and enjoy flying. I love the procedural aspect of flying. I love the concept of operating the aircraft. But real Airbus pilot or real pilot, it is a bit clickbaity, and I don't know why. I don't like it, because the two words don't mean anything, but it rubs me up the wrong way a little bit. I don't know, maybe I feel it's slightly disrespectful. Don't know. It doesn't sit right with me, that's why I don't put it. Although, if you're following me on Instagram, I did put it on there because, you know, reasons. It's complicated, man. I don't think X-Plane gets enough coverage in social media. I think they could do a lot better on that. Real Airbus noodle, real bus driver, real cookie eater. Right, how are we getting on with this descent? "25 minutes to landing." Sweet. Airbus pilot, of course. The A320 series that I did with the Flight Factor model, they were about the most average videos I've done. They didn't quite come out the way I wanted them to come out, partly because of the fact I had to turn all the visuals down to actually get the thing to run, and partly because I was trying to do it on a compressed timescale because it came out when I was very busy at work as well. They got the highest number of views on the channel across the board, and I think the TBM 900 is second to that. But I'm much happier with how the TBM series came out because I really enjoyed making those. It was good fun. And the PT-19, I'm enjoying that as well, but it's not a popular aircraft as far as the views go, which is a real shame, because it seems that only tube liners sell on X-Plane. It seems these days people only want to fly big jets, and I get that. You know, you go on holiday in these aircraft. The bug splat, when I got about a half hour into the aircraft and I was enjoying it, and then it went ping. What was that? Have I broken it already? No, it's a bug splat on the windscreen. Yeah, it's a nice feature. When I saw the videos of the PT-19 initially before buying it, I thought, man, it's going to be gimmicky. It seems a bit gimmicky. But actually, having used it, for that aircraft, it kind of works. Kind of like it. Have I tuned the wrong frequency? 109.2. 109.2. Should be able to see it. Right, let's put the seatbelt signs on. I'll forget otherwise. Ding. Right, so we are descending towards Amgel. It's going to be there between 90 and 104. That's perfect. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be looking around the side of the windscreen and getting a bug in your face. That would be unpleasant for sure. Not nice. I used to have a 125cc motorbike years ago, and it was my wife's actually. Yeah, that wasn't pleasant. Even at 60 miles an hour in the face, that wasn't nice. Plenty of protein, I believe. That's what they say. Are you still on the chat, Amy? Hope you're enjoying developing the UNS system. Can't wait to see that in the Q400. Q400 is... I spent a lot of time as a passenger on the Q400, so I'm keen to see it. Right, let's say we're clear down to flight level 90. Did I say 90? Probably. It's safe. Right, I've got a distance rating from the CGS, so things are looking up. Excellent. So I hope the Q400 work's going well for you, Amy. As I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing the output of that. If we get something that's got the level of visual modelling that you see on the newer 727, and something with systems on the higher end of the scale, that would be sweet. Is there a GTN 750 mod for the Airbus? Probably. You'd need to have two of them. The Q400 is an awesome machine. Its sector speeds are phenomenal. The rate of climb followed by the ability to stay high for a long time is fantastic. Runway 22? Yeah, no, the train would get in the way. We could still do it, we'd just have to go around the bay to fly the approach. We could do that. So remember, this arc here, we want to be at, we'd ideally be at 5,000 feet if we're going direct, and that would work. But you know, the profile's kind of working. The speed target's come back to 250 knots, so I'm going to select it, come back to 250 manually, and then I shall activate the approach phase. Before we activate the approach, check your unselected speed, because if we don't activate the approach, if we don't select speed, it'll come all the way back. So it's got LDEV, lateral deviation. I've not seen that on the real aircraft. Maybe it's a customer option. But yeah, you don't need that even to do a radius to fix, I don't think. Or maybe you do. Anyway, flight level 100. Let's put the display away. The lights on, and now it's just a case of making sure that everything's going to work as we expect. So I've got 33 miles to go. I'm at 10,000 feet. What I'm going to do is go to open descent. Let's say we're clear down to 3,000. So I'm going to set QNH 1013, set check 3 times, open descent, AltBlue 3000. I'll just give it a touch of speed brake now to help her go down. Yeah, the Q400's it's just a beast, an absolute beast. Right, I'll show you one other thing that the developers have done with the best of intent, but it's actually not quite realistic. I'm just simply going to manage the speed target now, and then I'm going to select vertical speed. Look at my blue bottom of descent arrow here. As I change my VS, look, I can basically move that exactly where I want it to be. just by changing the VS, the real thing doesn't move at that rate. It takes it a while to think about it. So doing a continuous descent approach is fairly straightforward in this model, he says before he screws it up badly. "9 degrees, we should probably put the anti-ice on just for a second. I've been in a Saab 2000 a couple of times, Toto. They're not the most reliable things. There's a fairly nasty report of a crash in Alaska, I think, with a Saab 2000, or the prop. It was a runway excursion and the prop blades separated and went through the fuselage, causing fatalities. It's unfortunate. It's one of the risks with turboprops, I guess. The S2000 is a lot smaller than the Q400, but it's fast, yeah. Right, speed is coming back, 220 knots, which is really what I want with any sort of non-precision kind of approach. I do not want to be going unnecessarily fast. So I said 5,500 to 6,000 feet crossing this blue line at 250 knots. I'm a little bit higher, but I'm a little bit slower, so that's a good place to be. Yeah, it did, Toto. It was a Southwest 737, had fan discs, fan blade separation. But I think it was one of the passengers was ejected from the aircraft rather than the actual blade itself causing blunt force trauma. On the Saab accident, it was a blunt force injury, which is particularly horrific. It's not something I really want to think about. Engine anti-ice is going off. So what we could do in the real aircraft is go into heading mode now. Let's see if this does it, and this is where it gets a bit exciting. So I'm going to pull heading, and I'm going to go direct. And we're going to ask air traffic to self-position, and they're going to say, yeah, whatever, do what you want. I'm going to put the radial in on here. So Bisbo with a radial in of 173. Does that look right? That looks right. Insert. It's going to give me nav blue. Airbus magic. I'm going to turn to the right, leave it in nav. It may sequence here, it may not, so there could be some excitement coming up. Let's see how leaving it in nav, it will plot its own intercept, so I can basically visually self-position the aircraft using the guidance on the box here. Yeah, and then it does that and sequences it, which is quite annoying. The problem is I don't have Bisbo anymore, but I can do it from this point, it's no big deal. I don't think the real aircraft would have done that. But every time I've done this, it basically sequences over to the next waypoint and gets confused. So now we've still got Bisbo, happily. I can just keep adjusting the track in. So I'm basically doing a continuous descent approach. Yeah, and it really does this, Totorico. It doesn't do it the smooth way this is doing it. This is fairly, you know, high-tech stuff. This is simulating. Let's have flaps 1. And if I just point this roughly towards where Bisbo is, done with that now, thank you. It's going to do the turn on all by itself. Yeah, it doesn't do it 30 frames a second. It's not that clever. Also on the real aircraft, if it does sequence, it is a risk. You can go direct and push the down button and it'll bring the previous waypoint back because, you know, routing downwind, there is a risk of it sequencing. All that's happened is I've still got Bisbo drawn up on here, but it's sequenced to the Fox November 04 Alpha point. Nice. Thanks for joining us, Captain Crash. Good luck with the Hindenburg project. Speak to you soon. Hope you enjoyed the stream. How long have we been streaming for? 2 hours? What do you think? Shall we save and we'll have a look at a missed approach just for giggles? Or do you not have time for that? Answers on the postcard. See, it's gone into nav and it's turning towards. Excellent. So there we go, capturing 3,000 feet at Bisbol, roughly, turning nicely inbound, and there's those expensive houses that the ILS would have us fly over. Let's go, miss, you want to see some flames? Well, how about, what we'll do, there's Alt Star. I'll fly it down, we'll do the landing first, and then we'll put the missed approach in second, and that way if there is any abnormalities in the repositioning, we are covered there. So we've captured Alt, the descent point is the two-way point, so I push approach, I got Alt and App Nav, that's what I expect. It should be showing a descent arrow on here, it's showing an intercept, no big deal. 2 miles to go to the descent point, I take flap 2, and once we get to flap 2, nearly there, I'll put the gear down, arm the spoilers, switch the lights on, the nose leg lights on, and remember I'm only going to the taxi position on there. Gear down, we've got 3 greens, flaps 3, here comes the VDEV, and flaps full. So by sticking to that sequence you'll get all the way back to your target approach speed roughly when the glide slope intercepts. If it doesn't, I go into FPA mode, but there we go, final app, and that's doing it perfectly. I've got the distances from the CGS. I'm going to change my flight directors to the track FPA mode, so it changes, so I've got the birdie. We're still all coupled up, we're still in final app, but it's just changing the presentation. And I'm just going to leave it like this. Now you'll notice the missed approach would take us around to the right. This aircraft won't do that. I have to intervene to fly the missed approach, and I have to intervene to fly straight ahead. So I've got to do something before 2,000 feet. However, I can see the airfield, so that's hopefully going to work out.
2,500.
2,500, we check the distance to airfield, distance to CGS at 6.5, that's fine. I'm clearly in visual conditions. I'm going to pull for track. Watch my FMAs. I go track, I get FPA -3 and track. Everything that's drawn on here, it's now ignoring. It's simply going to fly the 3-degree profile. It's not going to stop at 2,000 feet, it's not going to turn, it's just going to continue trucking on down here all by itself. Okay, I should have saved that config. Let's just do
100 above.
done. Oh no. How about that? That'll do. Right. Autopilot's off.
2,000 minimum.
Autopilot's off. Flight director's coming off. Yeah, so that's one of the traps. When you're in that mode with those flight directors, you forget you've got the flight director switched on. By turning the flight directors off, I get speed mode. It's going to remind Betty that she needs to do the thing in the cabin, so we've got landing no blue. And then I'm checking my distances to the CGS. I've got distances at 4 miles, distances at 3 miles, but to be honest, it should continue roughly where I want it to be. I'm landing on the right hand side, the right hand runway. And we've got a little bit of room to manoeuvre. So I'll take it down to 3 miles, and then we'll start the turn. Maybe about 3.1, 3.2. Here we go, 3.2, and give it maybe about 10 or 12 degrees. Can we see Pappies? I can see 3 and 1, I think. Just kind of, nope, 2 and 2, that's perfect. And then we just fly the turn on. So runway 22 is a fair bit harder because it isn't this gentle turn, it's a steeper turn on.
1,000.
Stable. Visual. Manual. Right, we've got gear down, 3 greens, everything's there. Awesome. I really need a second pilot for doing this. Especially this time of night. Right, I'll concentrate on the runway and not the Twitch chat for the next few seconds. We'll talk about economy flow when we reposition Toto. So just trying to get those pappies to 2 and 2, and then I'll reset. On a 321 you're normally a fair bit faster than 125 knots. That's those light weights that has us nicely slowed down. Second shot of whiskey.
500.
Bad old days. Right, 800 feet a minute, coming back to 700 feet a minute.
400.
The pappies at Nice are not ideal for the Airbus. They will read incorrectly in the final stages if you're on the ILS approach.
300.
Back that vertical speed off now. Keeping it on the centre line, keeping the vertical speed in the scan. Thinking about my pitch strategy. Watch the radalt and listen to the radalt calls. They're slightly out of sequence, out of position.
100. 50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 10. 5.
Spoilers. Rev green. Decel. There we go. Right, what I'll do is I'll just manually brake and I'll take it out of reverse and then hopefully enter minimum 4 character 12. That'll do it. First lever's back in the detent, so let me just pause it and we'll remind ourselves what we had here. Yeah, auto thrust, it depends on the company. Some companies will insist on auto thrust across the board. Other companies will suggest everything off. On the Airbus it's completely acceptable to use the auto thrust throughout the landing, and the SOPs that I work with demand auto thrust across the board. So that's how I fly in the sim. It's a pussycat with manual thrust. It really is easier in a lot of cases. Right, so two things. Economy flow, that is simply to do with the number of people you've got on the aircraft. If you've got, it used to be 115 on a 319 and a 320. It varies from company to company. But if you don't have a full load, you can use economy flow. On a 319 and a 320 and on a Neo, there's a toggle switch: high flow, low flow, and normal. But in this case, we get economy flow. So it's not to do with the landing, it's just to do with the number of passengers that we have. So let me double check that we've got the aircraft back in the state that we want it to be in. We are just coming up to the minimums. I've already disconnected everything. So we've got FPA, 3 degrees and track. So to remind ourselves, 2,000 feet is the minimum, and the missed approach is a right turn onto 140, and it's going to take us out towards this 504, 512 point. The key thing is getting everything slow and steady. Okay, I flew straight ahead, descending for 2 miles from this point, so I'm not going to fly into anything if I climb on the same track. I want to get the turn done promptly. I don't want to hang around waiting for it, but similarly, I don't want to rush things, so we're not going to fly and navigate in that order. I'll take the pause off. Hopefully it'll be fine where it is. If it starts to oscillate around, we'll go back into the menu and we'll reload the aircraft again, because it might, for example, have the thrust spilled down. We'll see how it goes. If we go around 10 feet below minimums, we can maybe get away with that. Right, here we go.
Minimum.
Go around flaps. Flaps 3. Mantoga, open climb, go around track. I've got lever climb, 2 stages back. Thrust climb, pull heading, right turn, 140. In the turn, thrust climb and heading, on the box, direct, Mike November, 504. Verify the turn, insert, we've got nav. Above F speed, flap 1. Speed limit is 185 knots, so we'll stay flap 1. I've got speed and alt star. Did that happen fast enough for everybody? Do you want to see it again? The call is go around flaps. The pilot monitoring retracts the flaps one stage. The pilot flying reads his FMAs. Positive climb, gear up, we're good. Let's have a look at that again. So, one more time. We'll just repeat the exercise. See if we get it right. You need a slow-mo. Right. Released.
Minimum.
Go around flaps. Flaps 3. Mantoga, open climb, go around track. We get positive climb, gear up, lever climb, thrust climb, into heading, right, onto 140. Above F speed, flap 1, direct, Mike November, 504. Nav, alt star. It's fairly straightforward once you've done it a few times, and that's probably the highest workload missed approach that you'll have in the single pilot Airbus, simply because of the fact nothing really works on the automation. Let's continue the approach and we'll do the bulk landing just as one final thing, and then we'll call it quits at that, shall we? So we're in track, we're going through minimums, we are visual, so let's remind Betty what she's supposed to be doing. There we go. Pop these flight director, the PFD up here, and watch when I take the flight directors off. It's very easy to land the aircraft with the flight directors in the wrong mode. Flight directors off, because there's not much visual difference there, and autopilot off. So we'll just keep trucking on down here, and we'll turn at 3 from the CGS. See how this turn on works out. As I said, runway 22 is by far the harder of the runways at Nice. Here we go. Start the turn. I was reading Toto's moderated message. Apparently FDs is another word there, so let's approve that. There we go. Right, we've got 2 and 2 on the flight directors. 2 and 2 on the Pappies. Flight directors are approved from auto mode. There we go. I should probably concentrate on flying the aircraft.
1000.
Stable, visual, I have control. So this is going to be a rejected landing, and we'll do it from, I don't know, about 200 feet or so. We're going to do the easy way. There's an easy way and the hard way. I'll show you the cheat in the Airbus. Oh, we're already manually flying it, so, you know, I've got the stick. I don't want to manually fly a missed approach, it's kind of hard. The Airbus makes it really straightforward. If you have to fly it manually, it is
500.
not an issue, because the flight directors come back to life.
400.
So we're taxiing down here, and somebody mishears their clearance. Their clearance is to hold short at Whiskey 3, and they've actually read back to line up and wait via Whiskey 3. And when you get the instruction, go around, I say again, go around. We go around flaps, retract the flaps one stage. It's Mantoga, SRS, go around track. I'll pitch for 15 degrees. So Mantoga, SRS, go around track, positive climb, gear coming up. P1. Lever climb. So it's going straight into alt star. There's speed alt star. I'm watching that speed trend. This is an Airbus gotcha. It's captured alt star, but it's now trying to level off at 3,000 feet. So I'm watching that speed trend like a hawk. I'm not retracting the flaps because I don't have that positive trend. Once I have the positive trend on the speed tape, then I can retract the flaps. I'm still in go around track. Right, flaps 1. And I'm going ahead to 5D. In actual fact, I could be looking for a hospital out there as well. I think it's this building here. well, 5D from the CGS is what we're looking for. And then we'll turn right. I'll anticipate by point 2. Come on, there we go. Oh well, maybe a bit late. And round we go. That's the approach into Nice on runway 04. The RNAV, you've seen a missed approach, you've seen a rejected landing, and you've seen a touchdown on 04 right. You don't really want to see me land it, shut down, and park it up because it's fairly late at night already. That being said, I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, call it quits at that. What sort of things do you want to see on the streams next? Do you want to see more airliners? Do you want to see the TBM? Do you want to see little airplanes? What sort of things do you like? You're not holding out for a 2-2 approach, are you? I can't do 2-2. Raw data NDBs. No, not to that. 22-bit trunk. I think that's not going to happen. So the choices for the next couple of streams, we could look at the INI A300 if you want to see that. We could look at the... I'm not doing 2-2, don't be silly. I've been up for nearly... what is it? I can't even remember now. It's well over 40 hours, I think. Maybe, no, it can't be. 36 hours at least. A300. The A300 is good fun, Toto. It's a nice aircraft for messing around with. You have that heavy aircraft thing going on. It's got some weird things on the autopilot, which you kind of wish they'd fixed. Other than that, it's good. Oh, thanks, Amy. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do for a living, really. Not instructing, just flying along. But it's quite easy to do the Airbus because it comes naturally. It's when I'm flying something that I don't spend so much time in that needs a bit more practice for. So the Airbus is easy. That's one of the reasons I got the Toliss model for the sim. Good fun to fly. Well, let's take it round and land it while you're almost here here, eh? Let's see what we've got. So it resequences the approach. Bisbo, radial in, insert. No nav intercept, don't lie to me. Thomas the Tank Engine. I don't think I'm really not Liverpool enough for that. Grab it by the stick. Nah, that's too difficult. The Airbus is supposed to make things easy. You're on a missed approach, you forget to activate the approach phase, things go wrong quickly. That's done. One more time with enthusiasm and then we'll park it, eh? How about that? Let's see what happens actually, let's see if it does this properly this time. I'm curious now. Nice is very, very pretty. You know, the first sim video I ever did on the channel was at Nice. In the Yak 52, I think it was, if you look for an old video called Channel Introduction. And it was really this kind of sunset in X-Plane 10. It was really nice. It's a nice part of the world to fly in. Also, Nice is where I did my command check to when I moved from the right-hand seat to the left-hand seat. It was to Nice Airport in a windy, miserable winter day. So it's nice to have they always choose an airport that's got some interesting things to brief for your command checks, and that's why, you know, Nice is kind of straightforward once you've done it a few times. That might be a rather optimistic intercept though. So you've got from now until the point the wheels touch the runway to have a think about what you want to see in the next stream. I don't have any work planned as far as I can see until at least the end of February. I had a couple of flights in February. Oh, there it's gone and sequenced that again. I had a couple of flights in February, but the extended UK restrictions have kind of screwed that up a little bit. It's actually dropped the whole approach out, so that's fun. RNAV 04 right, alpha, insert, direct. So there's just like one or two little things on the FMGC that doesn't quite gel correctly. Let's just do direct baseball, it'll be fine. Oh, you silly airplane. Oh, now it's going to, oh, stupid thing. It gets frustrating when it doesn't do what you want it to do, what you know it's capable of doing. We're going to have to actually grab the stick and fly it in a second. Where's my chart? D5 CGS. 8.1 CGS. Dee 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 dee. I don't know, this might not work out terribly well. Autopilot's out. Flight director's off. Lights are on. Betty's reminded. Right, round we go. Probably one of those birdies. That'll do. Here we go. Take flap 2 now. Flap 1, sorry. Flap 2. So just running a little bit outside as expected, because I spent a lot of time heads down trying to fix it rather than just flying it, but no biggie. When I'm flying with my joystick in the sim, even flying an Airbus, it's really tempting to push that trim button, like crazy tempting to push that trim button. Right, so I'm looking for, where's my birdie? 354. Alright, I'm looking for D8. So we're all slowed down already. Wonder what would happen in here. What's that, sorry? Oh yeah, no, it shouldn't. It should just move the manual pitch trim, and it'll sort itself out. I mean, you can nudge the trim if you really want to. There's no reason to do it. Right, gear down. Flap 3. A little bit of a balloon. So I'm looking for 8.1 to start the descent. I'm going to use 8.3 in fact. Flaps full. Start lowering the nose. Looking for that 3-degree path. And we're looking for 5D at 2,000 feet. So we're on the VOR. Just going to back that BS off a little bit. We're on the VOR, on the centerline. I'm going to take that out so I can actually see where I'm going. Keep coming down. So 7D, 2 miles to go, 600 feet to lose. tracking the VOR accurately with the birdie, and 700 feet a minute is good for 125 knots. Arm the spoilers.
2,500.
Remind Karen to do the business. It's very common, to be honest, at Nice to do these approaches entirely visually anyway, because you saw all that mode confusion that you could have. You don't have to worry about that when you've got the thing in manual flight. It's
100 above.
a lot easier, really. Yeah, we'll talk about econ flow on the ground again, Toto, if you want, but it's really simply related.
Minimum.
There's minimums at 4.9 miles on the descent profile. We're continuing. It's just to do with the quantity of people on board the aircraft. I think it's 160 odd for a 321 now. Less than that number you can be on economy flow. More than that number you're in normal flow. And the 319 and the 20, they've got a low, normal and high rotary selector rather than the push button. That's all it is. Simply reduces the bleed demand for the air conditioning system when you don't need high flow. However, on the current COVID restrictions, we tend to operate on normal flow all the time just to improve the airflow in the cabin. And we tend not to do packs off departures at the moment as well. I think, I have the horrible feeling I'm a little bit high now. I'm going to lower the nose and we'll start the turn. I was chatting about economy flow, not looking at the VS. Are there any pappies here? No, 2 and 2. That's alright. I'll back the VS off then. So yeah, we've still got the auto thrust in because it's kind of makes the Airbus easy to fly.
1,000.
So stable on the vertical profile. Turning is fine, vertical profile is spot on. We've got all the config, landing no blue. So yeah, what you saw with the FMGC there was it wasn't keeping track of the correct waypoint, and it wasn't letting you go back to the correct waypoint so I could get it to do what I needed it to do. It basically seemed to get stuck in a loop of always sequencing the waypoint, which isn't ideal. I see those 3 whites, just increasing the rate of descent ever so slightly, back to 2 and 2, and I'll reset to the datum of about 700, or I'll put the birdie symbol on about 3 degrees. 3 degrees.
500.
Heads up display would be awesome. Never flown with heads up display.
400. 300.
Oh, that does sound easy. It's like Google Earth Flight Simulator.
200. 100.
So watch the radals and listen to the calls.
50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 10. 5.
Spoilers, rev green, decel. There's 70 knots. Cancel reverse, just override the brakes a little bit, and we'll turn off. Yeah, that's exactly right, Pilsner. In fact, I think it's not prioritizing the sequence correctly. It's waiting until the 40 is finished before it reads the 30. Whereas it should prioritize the 30 because that's the one that will save you from bending the aircraft. If you're flying it at light weights and those slow final approach speeds, it's fine. But if you are flying it at 321 heavy weights, it really blasts through those radar calls quickly. So you've got to be careful with it. That was that's probably the one thing that's, you know, not ideal, because that 30-foot call, you can really depend on it on the aircraft. You wouldn't touch the pitch until about 30 feet. If you do that on this aircraft, you'll just bury it, you'll just go straight into the ground. Right, over we go. We've got the landing lights off, clear of the runway, strobes can come off. See if we can find somewhere to park. So what do you think? Do you enjoy the stream so far? Yeah, thanks, Pom. Yeah, it's exactly how it should be. You should get the lower ones should take an overriding precedence. Land by looking out the window. It's really difficult. You're not waiting for the blades of grass. Trying to judge your distance between 50 and 30 feet is really difficult. So you're looking for the cadence of those points. Alright, so I should probably actually start the APU. That'd be the done thing. And turn these bits and pieces off. Come on, APU, you can do it. Turn off lights, taxi lights off. Right, does 6 Charlie look like somewhere an Airbus would park? I think it is. Here we go. Oh no, I've done it wrong. I'm going to blind my poor parking guy. Oh well. Yeah, so having the rad-out callouts, the aircraft is not allowed to dispatch without the rad-out callouts working. Never seen that before. There's Austin's fuel tank again. Is it Felix that does the voice? He's on the 154 Pom. Oh, that'll do. Right, set the parking brake. I'll turn off that light, that I should have done before. APU is available. See, look at the brakes. Is Oisin still here? See if Oisin's still in chat. Oh, I think he's gone. Oh dear. At 230 degrees, that's fairly normal on the adults. So APU is available, shutting down. Fuel flow is 0, so seatbelts can go off. Slide should be disarmed by now, but we'll put the beacon off and that'll do it. And fuel pumps off. Transponder 2000. Stand by. There you go. You got from Hamburg to Nice and a couple of extra approaches into Nice just for giggles. A couple of missed approaches and a manually flown one at the end. I hope you enjoyed the stream, folks. Thanks for sticking with it. It's just under 3 hours, so we'll call it quits at that. Enjoy the rest of your evening, if there's still evening where you are. If it's the middle of the night, don't do what I did and don't binge all 30 episodes of Cobra Kai in one sitting, because although it is 80s awesomeness, I don't want to oversell it. Take care, look after yourself, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thanks very much, guys.